This time we're going to begin the funeral service of Mrs. Rosalie Weiner. Rabbi Paul Cohen from Temple Jeremiah will be officiating. We welcome those of you who are joining us via live stream. And at this time, we invite the family members with the career ribbons to please rise and come forward, and then everyone else in the family can surround them as the rabbi performs the ancient ceremony of Kriya.
Friends, we gather this morning to pay a lasting tribute of love and to really celebrate the life of Rosalie Weiner, who has passed into eternity. The poet wrote that it is a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be and oh to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings a painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. Death has taken our beloved Rosalie Weiner. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Rosalie's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever new message of God's nearness. It teaches us of our kinship with the divine, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Psalm 23, the Shepherd's Psalm. Adonai rohi lo echsar, bihino teshe yarbitzeni, al me menuchot, yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, Yancheni v'magle tzedek. Yancheni v'magle tzedek. Leman shemo. Gam ki elech b'getz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch lifanai, shulchan neged tzorerai. Dishanta vashemen roshi, kosi rivaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai leorech yamim. Adonai roi lo echsar. Adonai roi lo echsar. The pamphlet that you received here at the chapel, the inside cover, you'll find the translation of the 23rd Psalm, and I invite you, if you wish, to please join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi shem Adonai mevorach. God has given, and God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. In ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength in faith. With Job, we say Adonai natan. God, you have given. You gave us a loved one, Rosalie Weiner, who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray that we may gain the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and your love, as we now say, Yehi shem Adonai mevorach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. Amen. I invite you to take these next few moments to call forward the cherished memories that you have of Rosalie's life and how her love touched each of your hearts in this moment of silent reflection. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Be acceptable in your sight. God, our rock, our rock and our redeemer. God, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. The rabbis tell a story of two dear friends who were in the habit of taking long walks together. And on one occasion, on one of their walks, they found themselves overlooking a harbor and watching the movement of the ships in and out of the harbor. And they look down, and there's a cruise ship about to set sail, and there's great fanfare. There's music, there's streamers, there's singing and shouts of joy. And at the very same moment, there's a ship coming back into port with no fanfare, no music, no shouting, no streamers. And one friend turns to the other and says, this is exactly the opposite of what should be happening. The ship that's about to set sail, where all the celebrating is occurring, we don't know what storms it may encounter along the way or whether or not it will even safely make it back to port again. But the ship that has successfully completed its journey and made it back to port safely once again, that's truly the cause for celebration. And the rabbis take this story and they say, so it is with our lives. When a baby is born, there is great celebration, as of course there should be, but at the end of a person's life, particular life as well lived as Rosalie's life was, it's also an opportunity for us to celebrate that life and the love that she shared so generously with her family and her friends. And so we continue this celebration of Rosalie's life with the words of her family. We'll hear first from her sons, Gary and Steve, and then from the grandchildren. We'll hear from Jeff and Jeri, and I want to make sure I get everybody together. Jeff and Jeri and Kylie and Zoe and Casey as well.
Wow. Thank you, everyone, for coming, especially my cousin David, who came all the way from Arizona last night. I appreciate that. I wish I could thank everyone individually. Like one of my mentors, Leanne Schlafrock, used to do. He used to name every person at every event and what they did and why they were important to him. If there were 300 people there, he always did it. And I always admired that in him. Mom, first, I want to let you know how extremely proud I am to be your son. I've always taken it as a deep compliment when so many friends and business associates or anyone else who's just known you in any manner would ask me if I was your son. My greatest honor truly has always been being the son of you and Dad. As I always know, no matter whom asked if I was your son, I always knew this was a good thing. Are you Ralph and Rosalie's son? And when I was able to say proudly yes, I knew that was good. And I've always felt that way. And I look forward to feeling that way many years to come. While anyone who knows me knows that I could sometimes be very long-winded, I would really like to just share a few shorter moments today to let you know what I consider to be some of the most important aspects of my mom and her life. My mom, who passed away last Friday at the age of 92, was born in 1931. She went to Volta Grammar School. Some of her friends from grammar school are actually here, and went to Von Steuben High School, where she not only excelled as a student, but was an outstanding all-around athlete and a truly gifted A-plus rated tennis player. And she was always really proud of that. She was really an excellent tennis player. She played several times a week throughout her entire life since she was a little girl, all the way till she was in her mid-60s when her knee went out, but she was a terrific player and competitor and used to beat the men all the time. In fact, she soundly beat my dad in her adult years, which was no small measure, because he himself was actually a state champion here at Weill College. I also do remember one great tennis moment for my mom in her life when she was a line judge for the Kemper Tennis Open, which used to be an international tennis tournament that we used to have in Chicago and no longer do. And she got to be a line judge for a match with Rod Laver. and Tom Acker. And Rod Laver, us older folks, we know Rod Laver is the greatest tennis player ever, and Tom Acker was the doubles champion of the world for many, many years. And that was a very proud moment to watch my mom be a line judge at that tournament. I think one of the most wonderful things about my mom and both my parents was the fact that they did something that we rarely, if ever, see these days, and that's having spent their entire lives together since they were teenagers until when my father passed in 2005. God doesn't make too many couples like mom and dad anymore. We just don't see it. When my parents were 13, Ralph saw and met my mom, Rosalie, playing tennis at Eugene Field Park. He was impressed with her athletic prowess. And the story goes that also that day that my mom challenged my dad to a chin-up contest and beat him soundly. So that's how I think that they first fell in love. Shortly thereafter, at a school assembly where my father was speaking to the student body about World War II, my mom was listening in the bleachers with the student body, leaned over to her friends and said, I'm going to marry that guy one day, as a 13-year-old. And I think that's pretty cool. 6 or 7 years later, she did exactly that. And as she liked to tell it, she married him so she could finally have sex with him. And so that was a big moment for her. Big moment for all of us, but it was a big moment for them at 20 years of age. They were married for 54 years until my dad passed away in 2005. And I do believe that they went their entire lives without having ever dated, romantically kissed, or held hands with another man or woman in 54 years. And I find that to be simply amazing, especially today. I also just want to add quickly that my mom was instrumental with my dad in building our family's insurance business starting in 1951, along with my brother and myself. And wherein I believe that the very first Ralph Weiner and Associates financial statement that year in 1951 showed a net income of $43.17. So that was a big year. While I believe my brother Steve will be talking a little bit more about this and my mom and some of her personality and her traits, I do want to say myself that one of the most special and beautiful aspects of Rosalie's life was her complete love and her devotion to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I know that my own 3 daughters, Kylie, Zoe, and Casey, and her oldest great-grandson, Gavin, all grew up, alternating and sleeping at Grandma's on Friday nights, every Friday evening. One of them would be there and would stay over with Grandma since they were little kids, until they were all the way into their teens, where she gave them their first instrumental, for the first and most instrumental lessons in reading, music, cooking, art, loving, and of course, the joys of insurance. Just kidding about the last one. One last very important sharing I'd like to make before I turn things over to the rest of my family is that my mom, especially in her later years, was always concerned about keeping the family together and bringing the family together. And like many families, ours has also had moments and times of estrangement between us. But as Mom leaves now, I would like her to know that I open my arms to our entire family and look forward to many joyous times together. Mom, I already miss you, as I do Dad every day. I will love you forever.
I certainly want to thank everybody who came this morning, and Gary gave a good history of biography of her life. Oh, and I better can't see this. I've been chosen to tell some random stuff about our mom. When Gary and I were pretty young, we made up the name Gimusabi for our mom. It eventually became just Geem, and that lasted for 85 years. She was known as Geem by our children, our friends, her grandchildren, who called her Grandma Geem, and also her grandchildren, which she grew to love the name. Things that she was proud of, in no random order, I'd say she was the first vegetarian in Skokie, and we were eating tofu before we were 10 years old, therefore eliminating the need to have any friends ever come over to eat over. She loved to announce to everybody who'd listen, "I never ate at McDonald's once." She felt her badge of honor was being pretty much the cheapest human on the planet. Her most famous quotes were, "Who needs it?" And that's totally unnecessary. She was very proud of her work at the agency for over 40 years, and her and my dad built it from their kitchen table to a very successful agency, which boasted an employee roster from my grandfather, Adolph, both my aunts, Aunt Dina and Aunt Sandy, Gary and myself, Jeffrey and Jeri, and currently Cousin Lee and Gary's daughter, Kylie. At the office, in her 80s, it was not unusual to find Geem in the men's washroom, standing on the sink and unscrewing every other light bulb over the mirror to save energy. If anybody walked out of their office, even to make a copy or to pick something up, they would return to a dark office with all the lights turned off to further save energy, and it was uncanny how she knew every person who left their desk. Most of the time she worked for the agency. She handled all the agency payables. She wrote all the checks for everything and used to file them in a small box by date, and the pay dates were the actual day before they were due. So we got a lot of late charges, of which she would send a handwritten letter to every company and demanding they be dismissed, or she'd ignore them anyways. I can acknowledge I was a behavioral challenge growing up, for a short time, about 40 years. Later on, in the past 20 years, we came extremely close, and we would talk about everything going on, our feelings about Trump, any current events, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, she started loving my sense of humor, smart lady, and would literally cackle at my stories and told me she never knew how funny I was, which of course was common knowledge to the rest of the world. I remember she would get hundreds of letters looking for donations. And we had a whole ritual in it. She would first open the letter and see, in the later years, they would attach coins glued to the letter, hoping you'd open it. Their first thing was to pull off the coins and put it in a jar, which was totally filled the other night when we were there. And then she would study the pictures to see, was this worthy of her donating money to? She later claimed that it was the same African kid in every Feed Africa letter, and wouldn't send them to ones that she felt were duplicates. What she honestly loved the most and was proudest of was her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, and she loved them like we certainly never saw as kids, but we're so thrilled to see it with our children and grandchildren. And she never missed an opportunity to make every single one of them feel totally special. And she loved every moment she spent with them and would tell or show pictures to anybody she came across or would listen. She was a totally unique and special lady, and the last week I know and feel she was aware and comforted by everybody who gathered around her bed in this little room, and we were 11 to 15 people at some times, and just talking about her, telling her how much we loved her and that hope she's comfortable and how special she was to us in that time. I know how much we all are going to miss her, and we will never stop telling stories about our mom, Gene.
A little known fact about our grandma is that she rarely answered an I love you with an I love you too. We would end every visit and phone call with, I love you, Gram, and would be met with a big smile and a simple, thank you, Dolly.
We would laugh and joke about why she did this. And it really became just another Geem-ism amongst the most iconic list of others. The ironic part to us is that our grandma made me and Jeri and the three of her grandkids feel like the most loved grandchildren in the world. The loves of her life, her favorite people. So in her own cute way, we think she was simply thanking us for loving her back the same way that she loved us. Or that's at least how we'll think about it.
In the last few days reflecting, we realized that some of the best lessons we could have ever learned as parents ourselves came from our grandma. The most important one, to be present. As kids, Grandma wanted us over at her house as much as our parents would allow. This was at a minimum every Wednesday, and it was never just hanging around. The days were filled with visits to Sylvia Weber's pool, trips to the Skokie Library for new books and tapes, riding bikes, going to the Y to play tennis, doing puzzles, and using her tape cassette player to record our favorite songs and as many WWF wrestlers as Jeff and I could name. Then we would always help her cook the same dinner for when our parents came. Salad, rainbow trout, and sweet potatoes. She was a creature of habit and a vegetarian. After dinner was always a round of our grandpa's famous silly games, while Grandma cried laughing over the same game she cried laughing over the week before. How many of Grandpa's socks we could lay around our feet in 1 minute, followed by how many pieces of cereal we could catch in our mouth as he stood on a chair tossing them down.
Every spring break and winter break was trips to her and Grandpa's house in Arizona. The days were filled with swimming, tennis, the railroad park, trips to Gainey Ranch, and more. As we got older, she never wanted us to stop coming, so she let us invite our friends. Our best friends experienced the same treatment as we did. All the classic game meals, Grandpa's swim and hiking challenges with Grandma keeping score, a minimum of 20 comments a day about how we pack too much stuff, and a kiss on the forehead every night with a "good night, my tatala." She made everyone feel like an extra grandchild of hers and always loved the full house. Grandma was a creature of habit, and this is true when it came to her favorite restaurants, both in her home turf in Skokie and Northbrook and her home away from home in Arizona. In Scottsdale, there were 3 game staples. There was a pizza joint, a Mexican joint, and an Italian joint on repeat. We were a few days into one of our spring break trips and, per usual, began discussing dinner plans right after lunch. Grandma immediately suggested the Italian joint called Maria's, which we had already been to that week. Within seconds, me, Jeri, Dad, Janet, Sonny, and Beast replied in harmony, "No!" We all agreed eating at Maria's twice in the first 4 days of being there was enough. She pleaded her case for Maria's, but we shut it down. A few other suggestions were thrown out and vetoed, and then Grandma chimed back in with, "How about an Italian restaurant called When in Naples?" She pitched it as a nice Italian restaurant with a big menu to choose from. Our family was always hesitant when it came to game restaurant suggestions, but without any alternative options, we agreed we'd give When in Naples a chance. We pulled up to the restaurant, which looked all too familiar, and started freaking out that we were back at Maria's. Grandma smiled and pointed to the sign. In big letters, it read, "Maria's," and in small letters underneath, "When in Naples." We had been duped by game. Maria's and When in Naples were one and the same. To this day, it's one of the top moves we have ever witnessed and one of our favorite grandma stories of all time.
Grandma loved that we both found the loves of our life in Whitney and Steven. Even though every single wedding event, and there were many, was filled with all of her classics, presents, who needs them? What will they do with all these gifts? They'll need another house to put them in. She beamed in pure happiness and bliss every step of the way. When her first great-grandchild, Gavin, was born, her love reached new levels. She melted over him, and if she wasn't with him, she was hounding anyone she could find to look at his latest pictures. It was soon after Gavin was born that she got her final nickname, Gigi. In her 12 years as Gigi, she spoiled Gavin, Neve, Emery, Oren, Sloane, and most recently Zev, who she met this week, with so much love. She was the most outstanding and involved great-grandma, and as we have told our kids all week, they are so blessed to have had a great-grandma who babysat them, napped next to their beds, came to their sports games and recitals, played on the floor with them, and always wanted more and more time with them. That is so unique and very special.
We can only say that we feel the absolute luckiest to have known our grandma, to have been loved by her, to have learned from her, and have shared her with so many people, but especially our children. Her famous quotes, "It's enough to feed an army," and "enough already." Her famous holiday recipes, matzo ball soup, stuffing, and blintzes, and her kooky clothes and her stylish ones, and her memories will live on with all of us forever.
So we will tell you one more time, Grandma, we love you so, so much. And it is okay that you can't say it back, because trust us when we say we know it. And there is no thank you necessary, as loving you has been our easiest and greatest joy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Casey, the youngest granddaughter. Okay. Grandma, I want to thank you. Your love for me was so unconditional. I went through so many phases in life, some good, many bad, yet you were the one person who never seemed to judge me through any of it. As I look back on videos, photos, and just memories, your love for me never wavered, it only grew. You put up with me when no one else did. Wow, am I lucky. I remember one night I surprised you and took you to Oliveri's for dinner, just you and me. After we finished dinner, I remember we didn't want the night to end, so I took you to the gym I used to go to, which was right next to your retirement home. I will never forget the look on the massive gym guys' faces as a scrawny 17-year-old and her 89-year-old grandma with a walker slowly waddled their way in. Man, did we share a laugh that night. I'm so grateful for the bond that we had and for the memories we got to make together. You are so much more than a grandma to me. You are my best friend. Grandma, you truly are one of a kind. Your love, laughter, and ability to bring people together are unmatched. Among the many things I'll cherish about you, your spirit of giving stands out the most. Your generosity extended to family, friends, and the community, and you did so with grace and honor. You provided opportunities for your sons as a devoted mother. As a grandmother, you gifted us with lasting memories and unwavering love. Even as a great-grandmother, you taught your great-grandkids the power of love and the importance of shared history. There's so much I'll miss about you. From the sleepovers where I'd toss pillows and blankets down the stairs, to trying on your makeup, using your shower, and brushing your perfectly combed hair. Our pretend school sessions, games of dominoes and rummy cube, and your affectionate kisses will forever hold a special place in my heart. But above all, what I'll miss the most is our conversations. You pass down invaluable principles, drawing from your life experiences and the purity of your heart. Thank you for everything you've given me. As I face the days ahead without you, I'll look for a break in the clouds, reminded that someone as cherished and as unique as you will never be forgotten. I love you, Grandma.
As I grieve, I'll remind myself that the deep hurt stems from an abundance of love. Grandma, you are and always will be my best friend. It's no easy task to describe to everyone the type of person you were, the memories we shared, and the type of person you shaped me into. You've showed me so much love, kindness, unconditional support, happiness, and the meaning of family. Grandma's lived an incredibly full life, and I know she's left her mark, and she will live on through her impact she made on us, the people we have become, and the memories we will share. It's truly an honor to have had her as our grandma. I'll miss your smile, your contagious laugh, your generosity, compassion, and your matzo ball soup, which we just found out was actually the recipe was actually just from a magazine cutout. I will miss our sleepovers where we got to play in the kitchen, make fun of the commercials on TV, talk for hours, laugh for hours, and where I got to wake up with you by my side, all before we would head to Panera just for you to get a bagel and butter. Grandma, I will continue to strive to be like you. Thank you for being you, for everything you did for our family, and for being the most amazing grandma anyone could ever ask for. I love you forever.
Sorry, and I have one last thing to say for all of us. So, the last few weeks before I went to school, I kept breaking down by your side, saying goodbye, in case it was my last time seeing you. But it never was the last time seeing you, and it still isn't. I see you in the people around me. Your humor went to Zoe, your intelligence went to Kylie, your kindness went to Jeri, your charm went to Jeffrey, and the love you had for family went to your kids as they show their kids that love. Lastly, I like to think your good looks can be found in me and your sister Sandy. You're still here in all the people you touched, and it goes beyond that. I know in my heart you're watching over us and can hear us. So, Geem, from everyone here, we want to say we love you, we thank you, and we will never forget you. Your legacy will live on far beyond your years spent here on this earth. We love you, Grandma Rosalie.
As I sat with Gary and Stephen yesterday, one of the things that was shared with me was that Rosalie's greatest legacy, her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and you can see why. Our sages tell of a conference among the trees and of the decision of the trees to select a king who would rule over them. They sent a delegation to a shade tree which bore no fruit. The delegation inquired, "Why do you make so much noise when the wind blows?" And the tree replied, "The only way that I will be known is by making a lot of noise." They then turned to a fruit-bearing tree and asked it, "Tell us why you are so quiet. Why do you not let yourself be known? Even when the wind blows through your branches, you are silent." And the fruit-bearing tree replied, "I do not need to make a lot of noise to call attention to myself. My fruit testify for me." In this fable, our rabbis were telling us that there are at least two different types of people in this world. There are people who make a lot of noise, who demand recognition and honor because otherwise they fear they would have very little to recommend them. And there's also another type. There are people who are quiet and modest, and yet is full of kindness and love for their fellow human beings that they need not clamor to call attention to themselves. Rosalie was such a person. She was a quiet person, a modest person, a humble person, a kindly person, a person of character who lived a fruitful life. As you know, she was born some 92 years ago to Adolph and Mindel, the middle daughter of three, Diana of blessed memory, and Sandy, the youngest. It was not necessarily an easy time growing up. The family did not have much. But Rosalie demonstrated from an early age that she was resilient and possessed a strong spirit. She found solace and strength in the park. A gifted athlete all around, she found tennis to be her love, and not coincidentally, found her love, Ralph, in the park as a young girl. She found him, and that was that. They married some 6 or 7 years later, spending 54 years of life and love, working together, raising their 2 boys, Stephen and Gary, and traveling the world. Judaism was an important part of Rosalie's life, though she was not necessarily ritually observant. The family belonged to Beth Emet, where the boys each became bar mitzvah. She made Passover. You've heard about the matzah ball soup. I understand that the chicken soup was a 3-day effort. Everything had to be done just right, just so. She really came into her own and opened up as a grandmother. There was nothing better than a day playing with her grandchildren who adored her. She was resilient. She wanted to spend more time with Ralph. They built a business together, and she made it possible for Ralph to succeed and for the family to live the American dream. She still could not, after many years, believe that they could be sitting in their pool in their second home in Arizona. She was a self-taught bookkeeper, and as Stephen shared, she knew the value of $1. Rosalie, as was written, was the glue of the family, a true matriarch, and, in the words of her family, the leader of the band. Rosalie encompassed love and laughter, strength and humility. She was a beautiful person, inside and out. She was resilient, and she made a new home for herself and was actually the poster lady for North Shore Place. She was an extraordinary wife, a lifelong partner to Ralph, wonderful mother, supportive and encouraging, no matter how much she was pushed. She was a beautiful sister, close to her sisters throughout her life, and was there for them always, whatever they needed. Generous spirit. As a grandmother, she was adoring and adored. As a great-grandmother, she could not have been prouder, and she was proud of the lifelong friendships that she maintained, some of them from as early as first grade to this very moment. In the words of her family, she was and will continue to be loved by many, and her legacy will live on far beyond her years spent on this earth. The prophet Elijah, after a clash with King Ahab, was forced to flee for his life. He hid in a cave on Mount Sinai, and there, tired and discouraged, he waited for word from God. Suddenly there was a roaring windstorm, whose fury bowed the trees and broke them. But the Bible assures us, Lo varuach Adonai, God was not in the whirlwind. The storm was followed by an earthquake which shattered the surrounding landscape. However, our Bible again tells us, Lo v'rash Adonai, God is not in the earthquake. The raging fire follows the earthquake, and still the Bible tells us God was not in the fire. Then all grew quiet, and there was a kol d'mama daka, a still small voice which spoke the word of God to Elijah. We often meet people who are very loud, who burn with enthusiasm, who manage to turn things upside down. However, it is not necessarily these who attract attention, who do God's work in the community, who carry out God's will, and whose lives have a lasting impact on their family and their friends. There are others, however, whose lives are a kol d'mama daka, a still small voice. They are quiet and humble, modest individuals, but they are also full of kindness and of love, that they need no external pomp or circumstances to call attention to their fine qualities. To the sensitive observer, their lives are the best witness we have to the reality of God and to God's activity in our world. Rosalie was just such a person, manifesting love around her and her family and her friends, which will continue on long after her passing, in the values that she espoused, the value of a work ethic, the value of loving family, of being there for one another. May the memory of Rosalie Weiner, a devoted daughter, sister, wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and friend, always be for a blessing. And to this let us say, Amen. I invite you to rise as you are able for the El Malei Rachamim memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Kiamasirim, Et Nishmat Re'enu, Shehalcha Leolama, Baal HaRachamim, Yastireha B'Siter Kenafav Leolamim, Vayitzror B'Tzor HaChaim, Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Rosalie Weiner, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the entombment service will continue at Memorial Park Mausoleum at 9900 Grosse Pointe Road here in Skokie. The family will be together at the clubhouse at Royal Ridge, and they'll be there from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. The address is on the service folder, as well as the information about memorial contributions to Operation Smile. For those of you who are joining us via live stream, that information can also be found on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming, oh, hold on. No, but 2 to 8 is. Oh, the mausoleum is private? A correction, please forgive me. The entombment will be private just for the family. So the services here are concluded. We do ask that the pallbearers please come forward as we escort the casket of Rosalie Weiner from the chapel, and then everyone may return to your cars. Please rise.